The briefing room beneath headquarters was like a bunker, concrete walls. No windows, the only light coming from a large tactical screen and dim ceiling lamps. The air was cool, smelling of metal, ozone, and the faint, almost imperceptible scent of coffee that was always brewed before a serious operation. I sat next to Cap, feeling the weight of my gear neatly stacked at my feet. My L119A2, my standard workhorse, a Glock 17 on my hip, a vest packed with magazines, a medic kit, breacher tools. We were at full combat readiness, faces smeared with camouflage paint, though none of us knew yet what we'd need it for this time. We were Alpha Squad, not the most famous, but damn effective. SAS? We didn't do parades or public displays. Our work was in the shadows, combating organized crime, counter-terrorism operations in the nastiest corners of the planet, or like today, in our own city. We were a tool, precise and sharp, capable of cutting through any armor. Cap sat ramrod straight, his face impassive. He didn't say much, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Next to him was me, Rock, the deputy. My job was to provide firepower, clear obstacles, and back up Cap when things went completely sideways. I preferred reliable weapons and simple solutions. Across from us sat the rest. Hawk, our recon. Thin, almost invisible, with eyes that seemed to see through walls. He could slip anywhere and appear from nowhere. Steel, the assaulter. A mountain of muscle, fast and merciless in close combat, a master of room clearance, and Sparks, the genius of electronics and communications. His fingers flew over tablets and radios, but he was no less deadly with a weapon than any of us. Standing before us was an officer from MI6 or some other agency. They were always unmarked, their voices anonymous. He spoke about the target. A large international syndicate, drugs, money laundering. They'd found their lair, a carefully disguised complex in a rundown district of East London, where old industrial buildings merged with residential slums. Supposedly, it was the center of their operations, a massive warehouse, a secret casino for the criminal elite, a command center. But there was an addendum. Possibly something else? Undefined. A standard phrase designed to justify bringing us in instead of regular police. The mission: assault at dawn. Fast, quiet, effective. Capture the leaders, seize the evidence, neutralize the security. High risk, of course. East London is a labyrinth, and the syndicate was known for its brutality, but this was just another job for us. We trained for this. After the briefing, we returned to our gear room. The smell of gun oil was calming. Checking weapons, bolts slide smoothly, magazines full, rounds chambered, kitting up, every pouch, every grenade, every knife in its place. There was tension, but it was familiar, professional. Not fear, but focus. We discussed the plan, step by step. Entry point, routes, sectors of fire, contingency actions. Cap looked at us. His eyes held the confidence he transmitted to us. Everyone ready? His voice was quiet but clear. We nodded. Good. Gear up. 15 minutes out. The final preparations were mechanical, checking radio comms, turning on helmet cameras, a last drag of coffee. Our mentality was simple. Get in, do the job, get out alive. No unnecessary questions, just the task. We were a machine, ready for work. And we didn't know that this usual mission was about to turn into a nightmare that would forever change our perception of the world and ourselves. The weight of the weapon in my hands felt familiar and comforting. We went out into the night ready for any human threat. Dawn was approaching, but the city lights of East London and the heavy clouds overhead made the night almost absolute. Our transport, an unremarkable van, dropped us off a few blocks from the target. From there, on foot, melting into the shadows of the industrial ruins. The air was cold and damp, carrying the smells of mildew, rotting refuse, and somewhere distant, the River Thames. The target complex turned out to be, at first glance, an abandoned warehouse facility. Shabby brick walls, boarded-up windows, rusty gates. A perfect place to hide something big. We moved silently. Hawk was ahead, his figure barely discernible against the ruins. He scanned the area, infrared sensors, acoustic traps, surveillance cameras. He found a weak point in the perimeter. The electric fence was off, either by mistake or because the guards were overconfident. We slipped onto the grounds. The approach to the building was across open ground, but Hawk chose a route through piles of construction debris and the shadows of old containers. We reached the wall. Steele and I set a small C4 charge on the chosen door, thick steel plate, clearly not for an abandoned warehouse. Cap gave the signal. Boom! The sound was muffled, directed, but still deafening in the pre-dawn silence. The door blew off its hinges. We burst inside. Cap, me, Steele, Hawk, Sparks, a few other guys from the squad. The interior was dark, filled with dust from the blast. Our tactical lights cut through the gloom, picking out details. "Police, get on the floor!" Cap yelled, standard protocol. We expected a hail of gunfire, screams, resistance. Instead, panic. A few guards, sleepy and clearly not expecting visitors, dropped their weapons. Others tried to run, diving into corridors. The resistance was surprisingly light, almost comical. Steele and the other assaulters quickly neutralized those who didn't surrender. We cleared rooms one by one. The first levels were warehouses, boxes, crates, dust, nothing interesting. There were fewer and fewer guards, and those who remained seemed simply abandoned. Some lay on the floor, curled up in fear, others tried to hide. We moved quickly deeper into the complex, and then the strange stuff started. The deeper we went, the fewer signs there were of active syndicate operations, aside from the light perimeter security. The warehouses became empty, the offices abandoned in a hurry. There was none of the usual noise of a large criminal organization. It was too quiet. I felt the tension caused by expecting a fight replaced by another feeling, a sense of wrongness. Something was off here. It was like a building that had suddenly emptied out, as if everyone inside had abruptly vanished or fled. The guards we encountered were just an outer layer, left to be sacrificed. Hawk, who was moving slightly ahead, stopped at a passage leading downwards. "Movement below," he whispered on the internal comms. His tone was unusually tense. "But it doesn't sound like people." A new smell appeared in the air. Sharp, unpleasant, like something rotting mixed with something caustic, chemical. It stung the nose and caused nausea. Cap nodded. "Okay, Rock, you're with me. Steele, Sparks, Hawk right behind us. The rest stay here. Secure the perimeter and await instructions." We went down. With every step, the smell got stronger and the sense of wrongness became sharper. The ease with which we'd entered suddenly seemed not like luck, but an ominous sign. As if we were expected, or even worse, we weren't considered the main problem. The main problem, it seemed, was somewhere deeper. Descending the stairs, we found ourselves in a completely different world. The industrial decay of the upper floors gave way to luxury. Dim lighting, heavy velvet curtains, expensive wallpaper, marble floor. This was the underground casino the briefer had mentioned. Poker tables, roulette, a bar with mirrored bottles, but it was abandoned. Cards were scattered, chairs overturned, cigars were still smoldering in ashtrays, left hours ago it seemed. The smells of alcohol and expensive tobacco mixed with that new, awful stench that came from somewhere further in. The scale of the syndicate's operations became clear when we found the storage rooms. Not boxes of junk, but dozens, hundreds of kilograms of packaged drugs, white powder, pressed bricks. Nearby, stacks of money, neatly tied in suitcases and safes. This was a fortune equivalent to the budget of a small country, and it was all just abandoned. Anxiety grew. Why leave all this? Who would run away, leaving such wealth behind? We moved on, clearing room after room. The casino led to office spaces, also abandoned, then to more utilitarian areas. And that's when we started finding traces of other activity. The first was a room that looked like a medical laboratory, but with a clear bent towards torture. A gynecological chair with steel restraints, a set of surgical instruments but not sterile, dirty, with brown stains. Nearby, a cage, large enough for a person. The smell here was stronger, a mix of blood, vomit, and that same unknown chemical smell. Further in, it was worse. We found bodies. Several people by their clothes. From the syndicate's security. But their death, it wasn't from bullets or knives. The bodies were mutilated with incredible, wild brutality. Torn off limbs, ripped open bellies, smashed bones, as if something huge had played with them like a cat with a mouse. On the walls, blood spatter 8 feet above the floor. Holy Christ. Someone breathed. We were trained to see horrible things, but this was beyond. Wounds from firearms were clean. Deaths from knives were precise. This looked like the attack of a huge, maddened predator. But there were no claw marks, no paw prints we could identify. Just shredded flesh and broken bones. And that smell, it came from the bodies, from the floor, from the walls. We moved more cautiously. The tension became palpable. The threat wasn't what we had prepared for. This was something different, something primordial and terrifying. Our night vision goggles made the grim scenes even more surreal in their greenish light. Every rustle, every creak seemed like the steps of something large moving in the shadows. Sparks, usually imperturbable, nervously checked his sensor readings. "There are some anomalous thermal signatures below, sir," he reported to Cap. "Very strong. And something with the air. High level of some organic vapors. And I can't identify what it is." "Fang's depth," Cap muttered, looking down the corridor where the smell was strongest. He used the operation name, but at that moment it sounded ominous. We were on the threshold of something that shouldn't exist, and it seemed to reside right beneath our feet. We followed the smell and the thermal signal. The corridor led downwards, becoming narrower and darker. The brickwork of the walls became older, wetter. The air was thick and warm, as if we were approaching a huge, breathing furnace. The smell was now not just unpleasant, but nauseating. Rotting flesh, feces, and that sharp chemical tang. We came into a huge low hall. The walls were made of massive, rough concrete, reinforced with steel beams. The center of the hall was occupied by, no, not a cage. A broken, mangled structure of thick steel bars, each as thick as my arm, as if something inside had broken it. The floor around it was slick with blood and covered in chunks of flesh, human flesh. These weren't just bodies. These were remains, scattered with monstrous force. And above it all stood it. For a second, my brain refused to process what I saw. There were no words. Huge. 30 feet tall, maybe more. Covered in coarse, stiff, almost black fur, matted and wet with blood. Unnaturally long, bony limbs ended in huge paws with what looked like claws the size of a hunting knife. The snout. It resembled a wolf's, but was distorted, elongated, with exposed, bloody gums full of massive fangs. But the most horrifying thing was the eyes. 2 burning, insane lights deep in the skull, full of rage, hunger, and something resembling twisted intelligence. It stood, head lowered over the remains, its chest heaving heavily. It made a sound, a low, vibrating growl that passed through the concrete floor and hit our bones. The smells intensified. The stench was joined by the smell of fresh blood and animal sweat. This was not an animal, this was a nightmare, come alive before us. All our training, all our knowledge of real threats, it was all useless in the face of this. A second of shock. A moment when your brain screams, "Run!" But we're SAS. Our instinct is to react to a threat. "Fire!" Cap yelled. Automatic fire. The hall filled with the thunder of our L-119A-2S. Tracers cut through the darkness, slamming into the creature's massive body. Fur flew, dark blood splattered from wounds. We hit its chest, its head, wherever we could hit. Dozens, hundreds of bullets in seconds, and it didn't stop. It growled, not in pain, but in rage. The bullets went into its flesh. We saw it, but they didn't knock it down, didn't slow it. It just kept coming. Incredible muscular mass, driven by something unnatural. It lunged forward, not with the mind of a tactician, but with the wild, destructive force of nature. It hit steel first. Just a swipe of a paw and steel, our assaulter, was thrown against the wall like a rag doll. A crunch echoed. Before we could re-aim, it was among us, unbelievably fast for its size. I felt a heavy blow to my side. I was thrown back. My weapon flew out of my hands. My vest saved me from the worst, but I felt my ribs crack. In the chaos and the screams and the thunder, it grabbed one of ours, a soldier named Johnson, who was behind me. A short, terrible shriek, a wet tearing sound. It just tore him apart. The shock of what we saw was total. Our bullets don't work. Our strength is useless. This isn't a fight, it's a slaughter. Wounded but not broken, it used the second of confusion. Next to the broken cage was a large camouflaged grate leading down into the darkness. With a growl, more like a howl, it dove into the opening and disappeared. As suddenly as it had appeared, silence returned. Not a relieving silence, but one filled with ringing in our ears, the groans of the wounded and the horrifying reality of what had just happened. We regrouped, got back on our feet, stumbling, and saw the first losses, not from enemy bullets, from the claws and fangs of something else. We retreated from the cursed hall, dragging the wounded. I felt a sharp pain in my side, but I could move. Steele was in bad shape, arm broken, maybe internal injuries. Johnson. There wasn't much left of him. Another soldier, Max, had deep lacerations on his leg, bleeding heavily. We reached one of the abandoned offices on the casino level, locked the doors, set up a guard. The tension was incredible. Horror mixed with absolute disbelief in our own eyes. We, professional soldiers, had just been crushed by something that defied all laws of nature. Our gear, our training, everything was insufficient. Cap examined the wounded with cold but focused fury. His face was pale under the camouflage paint. He tried to contact command. "Control, this is Alpha 1. Report. Objective secured. Main resistance neutralized. Discovered large, unidentified hostile entity deep within the complex. Non-human. Conventional weaponry has shown extremely low effectiveness. Taking heavy casualties. Repeat heavy casualties. Requesting evacuation and specialized support. Immediately." The response from their side was confused, full of questions. What kind of entity? Non-human? What does low effectiveness mean? Cap couldn't or wouldn't go into detail over an open channel. He just repeated the request, his voice growing harder. Examining the dead and wounded confirmed our worst fears. Max's wounds were deep, torn, as if inflicted by huge claws. Steele's fractures, they could only have been caused by enormous blunt force. And what was left of Johnson? It was beyond description. In one of the rooms on the upper level where we'd retreated, we kept a prisoner. One of the guards who hadn't run fast enough. A tough guy, a mercenary, but now he was trembling, looking at us, at our rage, at the blood on our uniforms. He had heard the screams. He had heard the thunder. "You!" Cap approached him, his voice quiet and deadly. "Talk. What was that?" The prisoner flinched. I don't know. The boss, he kept it down there, below." "What's it? An animal?" I asked, my ribs aching with every breath. "I don't know. They said, the collection. Something like that. Expensive. Brought from far away. Contraband." He spoke haltingly, his eyes darting. "Why was it there? Why did you leave it?" It broke out. Today, this morning, after they gave it something. Gave it what? "I don't know, some kind of chemistry, the boss said. To make it stronger, more aggressive, they were injecting it all the time." It hit us. A syndicate involved in drugs and chemistry. They didn't just keep a monster. They were enhancing it, trying to make it even deadlier using perhaps their own synthetic drugs or some experimental compounds. "Is it because of this chemistry?" I asked. "Is that why our bullets don't work?" The prisoner shuddered. I don't know, but yes. After they gave it that, it became completely wild, uncontrollable. It killed everyone down there, the guards, the boss's men, the ones who worked with it. The boss ran, everyone ran. We thought you would stop it." He fell silent, his words broken by fear. The creature wasn't just an exotic predator. It was a mutated, chemically enhanced nightmare, invulnerable to conventional weapons, maddened, deadly. The escape had been provoked by them, turning it into a killing machine. And now this nightmare was somewhere deep within the complex, or already looking for a way out. The truth was worse than any intelligence brief. We had faced not crime, but the result of monstrous experiments now unleashed. And it had just shown us how helpless we were. The information, wrung from the prisoner, hung in the air heavy and suffocating. Cap stood in silence, processing it. A mutated, chemically enhanced nightmare, invulnerable to standard weapons, loose beneath London. A city with a population of nearly 9 million people. If this thing got out, the consequences would be catastrophic. This wasn't a standard criminal incident. This was a national-level threat. Cap tried comms again. This time his report was more direct as much as possible over an open channel. "Control, situation critical, entity has mutated, exhibiting anomalous resistance to ballistic impact. Source of problem, preliminary findings indicate illegal biological chemical experiments. Immediate zone isolation and delivery of specialized ordnance required. Our current loadout is ineffective." The replies from the surface were full of disbelief and bureaucratic red tape. "Specialized ordnance? Clarify threat, Alpha 1. Biological? Chemical? Identification protocol required?" Cap swore under his breath, a rare occurrence for him. He looked at the wounded, at the bodies of the fallen. Help, if it came, would be too late. Or they simply wouldn't believe. He made a decision. It was a heavy one, but the only one possible. "Abort evacuation." His voice was level, but it grated like metal. "Mission changes. Priority target liquidation. We do not leave the object until this thing is neutralized." A tense silence fell. Liquidation. a target that our L-119A2S couldn't kill. This meant we were on our own, and we had to find a way to kill what seemed unkillable. We began frantically assessing our remaining gear. Standard 5.56 mil rounds were useless. What did anyone have? Grenades? Dangerous in enclosed spaces? Explosives? Maybe collapse a ceiling? But where? Rock, what have you got? Cap asked, looking at me. I thought. In my kit, intended for breaching or engaging light armor, I had a specialized combat shotgun. Not a regular one, a heavy pump action, loaded partly with door breachers. Special non-lethal rounds for blowing hinges. And, yes, I had a few powerful large caliber slugs. They were meant for penetrating light barriers or engaging targets in heavy gear. Not many, only 5 rounds. But it was something. I have a shotgun, sir, I said. And 5 slugs. I reckon they could do some damage at close range, maybe the head. 5 rounds. Against a creature the size of a small elephant, capable of withstanding bursts of automatic gunfire. It didn't inspire confidence, but it was the only option. .50 cal? Steele asked, who, despite the pain, was sitting propped against the wall, listening. Their guys might have one for punching through walls or vehicles. We searched the adjacent rooms where the syndicate might have had caches. In one of the rooms behind a false wall, we found something that made our hearts leap. A heavy case. Inside, a large caliber .50 BMG sniper rifle. A huge, brutal thing, designed for hitting targets a mile away or penetrating armored vehicles. And next to it, a box of ammunition. Not much, maybe 20 rounds. Apparently, the syndicate boss kept it for some of his own very serious purposes. Cap looked at the rifle. A spark of hope flickered in his eyes. This caliber was a completely different matter. A bullet the size of a finger, capable of piercing engines and concrete. Maybe this could stop the thing. "All right," Cap said, his voice hardening. "We have a chance. This weapon is our main asset now. Rock, you're working it. Max, you need evacuation, same as Steele. Sparks, you stay here, maintain comms if you can, and cover the wounded." It was hard to leave our comrades, but we had a different task. The creature had gone down into the sewers. We had to go down after it. Our mission had changed from a raid to a hunt. A hunt for a monster in the deepest parts of London. And we had only 25 rounds that could possibly make a difference. The creature had disappeared through the large grate in the floor, obviously leading into the city's sewage system. After finding the .50 caliber rifle and regrouping, I and the remaining men, Cap, Hawk, and 2 other guys, returned to that opening. The wounded and Sparks were left in a relatively safe zone above under the guard of 2 more. They would wait and pray. Beneath the grate gaped blackness. A smell rose from the depths. Not just that chemical stench from the complex, but something much older and more repulsive, the stench of millions of human lives passing through pipes, mixed with industrial waste, decay, and whatever the creature left behind. It was the smell of true hell beneath the city. We turned on our night vision goggles. The world around us instantly became monochromatic, greenish hues of mud, water, old brick. We descended a rusty metal ladder. These were Victorian tunnels. Built a century and a half ago, massive, made of red brick, but now dilapidated, covered in slime and muck. The main channel below was about 6 feet wide, with fetid waters slowly flowing along the bottom. To the sides, narrow passages, branches, smaller diameter pipes disappearing into the dark. The ceiling vaulted about 8 feet high. Sounds here were distorted. The echo of dripping water, our own breathing, careful steps splashing in the water seemed deafening. There was scuttling rats, large, fat ones, scurrying along the walls and in the water. There was a sense of absolute darkness that even our tactical lights couldn't dispel. Their narrow beams only picked out small patches of grime, making the surrounding darkness even denser and more terrifying. Thermal imagers were almost useless. The temperature in the tunnels was relatively constant. The water and damp walls concealed most thermal signatures. Detecting anything in this environment was almost impossible. Comms. That became a problem immediately. Concrete, earth, water, it all jammed radio signals. Our advanced systems worked intermittently, crackling, losing signal. We were isolated. We moved with extreme caution, trying to maintain some semblance of formation, one ahead, the others behind him, covering the rear and flanks. But the conditions made this almost impossible. The narrow passages forced us single file. Slippery walls, uneven floor, unexpected dips in the water. Every step required attention. We were trained for urban combat, clearing buildings. But hunting in this foul, slick labyrinth, this was something else entirely. Hawk went first, his NVGs set to maximum sensitivity. He was our eyes and ears in this darkness. I followed him, my L119A2 ready, but feeling uncomfortable without something more powerful. The .50 caliber rifle was too cumbersome for the narrow tunnels. I carried it disassembled, or another soldier carried it, ready for use in wider areas. My main weapon was the shotgun with those 5 life-saving slugs, but I didn't want to waste them unnecessarily. With every foot, descending deeper into the city's foul gut, we felt the pressure mounting. This wasn't just a hunt. This was an invasion of something's territory, a territory perfectly suited for a predator we couldn't stop. The walls felt too close, the air too heavy, and somewhere ahead, in that absolute blackness, lurked our target. Or perhaps it was already behind us. The feeling that we were trapped grew stronger with every step. The sewers turned into a nightmare. These weren't just tunnels. This was the perfect hunting ground for the creature hiding there. It didn't charge head-on, as you might expect from a large, powerful beast. It was smarter, or its instincts were honed to perfection by this environment. It became the hunter, and we, its prey. The attacks were sudden and lightning fast. No warnings, only a sound, a splash of water, a rustle, a growl. And it was there. It used the darkness, the echo, the tunnel branches to appear from nowhere. The first attack down below was on one of the guys behind me, Stevens. We were moving through a narrow section. The water came up almost to our knees. I heard his breathing behind me. Suddenly, a loud splash, a scream full of absolute horror. I spun around, pointing my light and weapon towards the sound. The greenish NVG light caught a silhouette, massive, wet, disappearing into the entrance of a side pipe branch. Stevens was screaming, his voice broken, gurgling. There was the sound of a struggle, the crunch of gear, a short, desperate burst from his rifle, aimed into emptiness, into the wall, and then silence. Only the echo of gurgling and splashing water as it dragged him into the darkness. It lasted seconds. Seconds when you freeze in shock before instincts take over. We rushed to the passage, too narrow, too dark, and the sound of struggle had already faded somewhere far away. "Stevens, respond!" Cap yelled on internal comms, but the only answer was crackling and hissing. Terror was contagious. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle felt like the creature approaching. We became nervous, jumpy. The discipline we so proudly maintained began to fray. It's hard to keep formation when you don't know where the next attack will come from, and when you know your bullets are useless. The next attack was on Hawk. He was ahead, scanning the tunnel. We heard his short, sharp yell. Then, silence. No shot, no struggle, just disappearance. As if the ground had swallowed him. He was our eye, our guide. Without him, we were almost blind. We discovered that the creature didn't kill everyone immediately. It dragged its victims away. Why? To feed, or just clear them from its path, like annoying toys. We didn't know. And that was the worst part. I felt the fear creep under my skin, cold and sticky like the water in the tunnels. This wasn't the fear of dying in combat. This was the primal terror of a monster, of the unknown, of helplessness. Our weapons were almost useless. We were armed with scalpels against a tank. The only hope the .50 caliber, but it couldn't be used in the narrow corridors, and we needed to hit it precisely. Losses mounted. In the short time in the sewers, we lost more men than in years of operations. And this was not from an enemy we could fight by the rules. This was from something living in the dark. We stopped in a small widening of the tunnel, backs against the walls, illuminating the space with lights and NVGs. Each of us listened, eyes darting, looking for any anomaly in the greenish gloom. The air was heavy, damp, foul, and somewhere nearby, we felt its presence. This wasn't just an animal, this was something evil, something that reveled in our panic, our vulnerability. We were in its labyrinth, and it was the hunter, and we, the survivors, had fewer and fewer chances of getting out. Advancing through the tunnels turned into a slow, grueling torment. Every step was a risk. There could be pits under the water, sharp objects, or something waiting. Every sound, a splash of water, a creak, a distant rustle, made our hearts leap into our throats and our weapons rise. Paranoia became our constant companion. We tried using grenades, threw one into a side branch where we thought we'd heard a sound. A deafening explosion in the confined space, vibrations along the walls. But there was no effect. The creature was too fast, too nimble, knew this labyrinth too well. And the risk of ricocheting shrapnel or being stunned ourselves was too great. We stopped using them. The labyrinth did its work. The tunnels branched, intertwined. Maintaining communication became almost impossible. We divided not by plan, but by necessity or due to sudden attacks. In one place, the tunnel forked. Cap, me, and another guy, Davis, went one way, the remaining two the other, agreeing to meet further on. We'd only gone a few feet when from behind us, from the tunnel we had just come from, a scream echoed. Then, silence. Comms with that pair gone. We couldn't rush back. It could be a trap. And we couldn't be sure we'd even find them or whatever had taken them. The escalating atmosphere of horror was almost physical. I saw the fear in Davis's eyes, reflected in the green NVG light. I felt it in my own body, tense muscles, dry mouth, trembling hands. This was unlike any fight I had ever been in. There, the enemy was something you could see, shoot at, whose actions were logical. Here was something that moved in absolute darkness, invulnerable and merciless. We found traces, not just blood or shredded flesh like above. Here, in one of the wider collectors where it had presumably dragged its victims, were the remains, impossible to describe without turning your stomach. Torn apart, mixed with garbage and grime. This wasn't just killing, it was annihilation. Seeing it, Davis almost broke down. Cap sharply reined him in, his voice hoarse. We kept moving because stopping meant dying, or going insane. But where were we going? We had lost our orientation. The sewer labyrinth had no beginning or end. We were just wandering in the dark, pursued but not seeing the pursuer. There were only a few of us left. Cap, me and Davis. Just three. 3 men, lost in the endless, foul-smelling tunnels beneath one of the world's largest cities, hunting a monster that had wiped out our entire squad. Ammunition dwindled with every nervous shot into a shadow or sound. All we had left were our main weapons, and that heavy .50 caliber rifle that Davis carried on his shoulder like a cross. The light was fading not only in our flashlights, but in our souls. We were losing hope, losing comrades, losing ourselves in this black, foul gut. And we knew that at some point, the hunter would emerge from the shadows for the final strike. We had walked for hours. It felt like an eternity. The sense of time was lost in the perpetual darkness and the monotonous splash of water. The fatigue was such that every step was a struggle. My ribs ached with every breath, my muscles burned. Our faces, even in the green light of the NVGs, were exhausted, covered in grime and sweat. We stopped in a place where several tunnels converged into a small, round chamber. We leaned against the cold, wet walls, trying to catch our breath. There were 3 of us, Cap, me, and Davis. All that remained of an elite SAS squad. 8 men had entered this complex. 3 had made it to this point down below. I checked my magazines. 3 were almost empty. My shotgun had only 2 slugs left. Our main rifles were also nearly out of ammo. Our only real firepower was in Davis's hands, the .50 caliber rifle. He sat, clutching it like the most precious treasure. It was heavy, almost unwieldy. But it was our only hope. The silence was oppressive. It was broken only by the distant echo of dripping water and our own ragged breathing. We hadn't heard the creature for some time. That could mean it had gone further or that it was waiting for us. Cap raised his head. His eyes, even in the green light, looked old and tired, but there was steel determination in them. "We can't stay here," he said quietly, "and we can't go back. It's out there, between us and the exit. Our only option is to go forward." Forward? Where? Into this endless darkness? In search of the creature that had annihilated us? But he was right. There was nowhere to retreat. We were cornered, though that corner was a multi-mile labyrinth beneath the city. We moved again, following the widest tunnel, which led downwards deeper into the depths. This tunnel seemed to be part of an older, perhaps even pre-Victorian system, or simply a larger collector. The walls here were even more massive, the brick darker. And then we came out into it. This wasn't just a tunnel, but a vast underground hall. Perhaps an old reservoir or a main collector long disused, but still filled with sewage several feet deep. The space was 50 feet wide and stretched into the gloom for 100 feet or more before disappearing from view. The vaulted ceiling was lost somewhere high in the darkness. In the middle of the hall rose a massive, slime-covered concrete pillar. The air here was even thicker, and the stench almost unbearable. And in this vast space, on the opposite side, we saw it, the creature. It lay by the wall, its massive body almost blending with the grime and shadows. It wasn't moving. It seemed to be sleeping or waiting. Even at a distance, in the greenish light of the NVGs, it was clear that its fur was matted, and dark, wet patches were visible on its side, wounds from our previous shots. It was wounded, but not dead. This was the place. Our place. The place where our hunt would end. Either we killed it here, or it would kill us. There was no escape. We were trapped, cornered by this labyrinth and this creature. We had only 3 men left, a handful of rounds, and that heavy rifle. The last stand, in the heart of the darkness beneath London. It heard us, or smelled us. As soon as we stepped into the wide hall, the massive shape by the wall twitched, Its head, with the distorted, wolf-like snout, rose, its burning eyes fixed on us. It didn't look weak, despite the wounds. It looked deadly and cornered, and just as vicious as before. We took positions at the entrance to the hall, using the narrow passage as cover. Cap, Davis with the .50 caliber, and me with the shotgun. Our breathing was ragged. Adrenaline surged through my veins again, but it was the adrenaline of desperation. "Davis, ready the weapon," Cap commanded quietly. "I need a clean line of fire. Rock, be ready to distract it if needed." Davis deployed the rifle. It was a heavy, awkward process in these conditions, but he did it quickly, professionally. The rifle clicked, ready for action. A huge .50 caliber round slid into the chamber. One shot, maybe two if we were lucky. We couldn't afford to miss. The creature rose onto all fours, then slowly straightened, rising onto its hind legs. 30 feet of pure nightmare covered in dirty fur, with a bloody maw. It took a step towards us, a slow, confident step. It knew we couldn't stop it with conventional means. "Go!" Cap yelled. He and I opened fire with our rifles and shotgun, trying to concentrate our fire on its center mass to draw attention. The standard bullets hit, kicking up chunks of fur and flesh, but it didn't even slow down. It growled and charged forward, its long limbs moving with surprising speed, crossing the hall. It was almost on us. Dozens of feet turned into nothing. Davis was still aiming, trying to catch the creature's head in his sights, but it was moving too erratically. "I need a second," Davis yelled, his voice trembling. "Rock," Cap shouted. This was the moment. The only chance. My shotgun with the 2 remaining slugs. Not enough to kill it, but maybe enough to stop it for a split second. I took a breath. "On me," I yelled. I darted out from behind cover right in front of the approaching nightmare. Raised the shotgun, aimed, fired. Boom! The recoil was heavy. The sound of the shotgun blast in this hall was like an explosion. The first slug hit the creature's shoulder. Blood spurted from the wound. It flinched, its charge slightly deflected. I fired again, aiming for the head. Boom. The second slug hit somewhere around the jaw or neck area. It roared, this time in pain. Its head snapped back. Those 2 shots were enough. It hesitated for a fraction of a second, redirecting its attention to me. That was the second Davis needed. I dropped the shotgun empty and tried to leap back. It was already here. A huge paw swung. I saw a flash of insane eyes, the bared maw with fangs the size of bananas. I felt the awful smell and the heat of its breath. And at that moment, the loudest, most powerful sound I had ever heard in an enclosed space erupted. Boom. The sound of the .50 caliber shot wasn't just a sound. It was a physical impact. It went through me, through the concrete, through the very mud. I saw the creature's head literally explode. Not a bullet, but a small, armor-piercing shell had hit precisely in the skull. It froze for a moment, brainless. Its body twitched, letting out a final, inhuman, gurgling shriek that tore the silence of the hall. Then, like a felled tree, the massive body crashed into the fetid water of the collector with a monstrous splash. Mud and water fountained up. Silence fell. A ringing, absolute silence after the thunder and the screams. I lay on the slick floor, covered in grime, deafened, alive. Cap and Davis came over. They looked no better than I did. We looked at the huge, lifeless carcass in the water. It was dead. The nightmare was over. The silence after the creature's death was almost as deafening as the .50 caliber shot. It pressed down, filled with the echo of our own breathing, the ringing in our ears, and the slow, steady drip of water somewhere in the distance. The air was still thick with the creature's awful smell, mixed with the scent of gunpowder and sewage. We got up, stumbling. Our legs barely held us. I felt the pain in my ribs, the pain in my arms, pain all over my body. But it was a familiar pain, the pain of being alive. We stood in the center of that vast, dirty hall, amidst bodies. The body of the creature, massive, motionless, its mangled head submerged in the water. And the bodies of our comrades, whom the creature had apparently dragged here. They were scattered around the perimeter of the hall, in that horrible, mutilated state we had already seen. Davis turned away, throwing up. Cap just stared, his face like stone. We were exhausted, physically to the limit. Morally broken. We had gone through hell. We had faced something that should not exist and survived it at the cost of almost the entire squad. 8 went in. 3 remained. Cap took out his radio. He tried to get a signal for a long time. Finally, a weak hissing sound. "Control, this is Alpha 1. Cap's voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. "Report, target liquidated. Repeat, target liquidated." A pause. Hissing. A voice from the other side, cautious. "Copy, Alpha 1. Squad status? Casualties?" Cap paused again. He looked at Davis, at me, then at the bodies around us. "Casualties. Heavy. Repeat, heavy. Almost a full squad." He didn't give numbers. Not now. "Requesting coordinates for extraction. We're coming out." Having received the coordinates, we began the heavy trek back. Back from the depths, from the realm of grime, darkness, and death. Every step was agony. We were leaving the bodies of our comrades there, down below. We couldn't carry them. It was one of the hardest decisions, to leave them in that cursed pit. But we were barely alive ourselves. We said our goodbyes to them mentally, promising to come back for them if there was even the slightest chance. The way back through the narrow, slick tunnels, past the places where our other guys had died, was silent and agonizing. Each of us was immersed in his own nightmare. The images of what we had seen were forever burned into our minds. The smell haunted us. Finally, after what seemed like an endless climb up rusty ladders, we saw light. Not bright daylight, but the dim light of emergency lamps and the flashlights of our colleagues from the surface, who were waiting at the sewer exit, which they had apparently located by our weak signals. Climbing out, into the relatively clean air, into the presence of other people, I felt a shiver run through me. We had made it out. But we had emerged changed. We had gone down as professional soldiers on a standard mission. We had come up as survivors of a nightmare we couldn't even describe. Leaving behind, in the darkness, not only the bodies of our comrades, but pieces of ourselves. They pulled us out quickly and quietly. No heroic reception, no public ceremonies. They put us in a waiting van, took us to some secret base. There were medics. They treated our wounds, gave us sedatives. There were psychologists. They tried to make us talk. There were officers from the agencies. They asked questions. Many questions. About the creature, about what we saw, about what we did. But the answers were difficult. How do you describe something that cannot be put into words? How do you explain why bullets didn't work? Why it was so fast, so brutal? Our report was as dry as possible. Hostile bioasset, anomalous resistance. Neutralized using heavy anti-material ordnance. Significant personnel losses during combat contact. The official report that leaked to the newspapers, if anything leaked at all, was, as expected, completely different. A successful SAS operation against a major drug cartel in East London. A fierce gun battle in an underground casino. The discovery of drug and money caches. A fire broke out during the operation. leading to the partial collapse of old structures. Unfortunately, in the course of heavy fighting, the unit sustained casualties. Not a word about the monster. Not a word about the sewers. Not a word about what we saw, and that's how it should have been. The world shouldn't know. We, the survivors, returned to normal life, as much as that was possible. But normal life felt alien. The nightmares came almost every night, the darkness, the smell, the creature's insane eyes, the screams of comrades dragged into the dark. I would wake up in a cold sweat, reliving those moments over and over. Psychologists talked about post-traumatic stress disorder. Obviously, it was that. But they didn't know what we had seen. They didn't know about the real trauma. The trauma of facing something that shouldn't exist. A primordial horror nesting beneath the surface. Davis discharged a few months later. Couldn't do it anymore. Cap, he stayed in the service. Became even more withdrawn, even harder. We rarely talk about what happened. Words are meaningless. We understand each other without words. We are brothers in hell. Sometimes, walking through London, I look at ordinary things. At the red double-decker buses rushing on their routes. At the black cabs honking in traffic. At people hurrying about their business, laughing, talking on their phones, living their small, normal lives. And I know. I know that right beneath their feet, under the asphalt, under the concrete, under thousands of years of this great city's history, another world exists. A world of darkness, a world of grime, a world where dwells something. We killed that creature. But the prisoner spoke of the collection, of a source, of chemicals that enhanced it. Where did it come from? Was it the only one? Or somewhere else, in other depths, in other cities, does something similar hide? I look at the shining, living city above ground, and I feel the cold of its hidden depths. I know that the horror is real, and it is very close, just a few feet below. Most people will never know about it, and perhaps that's for the best. But for me, and the few others who went into Fang's depth, London will forever remain a city beneath which a nightmare hides, and it will never, ever let us go.